Hello and welcome to the Lower Makefield Township Board of Supervisors meeting, March 3rd, 2021. It is 7:30 p.m. Today you can dial in for public comment, dialing 646-558-8656. You will enter the meeting ID 230-936-1902, followed by the hash or pound sign. Please remember that there's a 10-second delay on social media when you're watching, and we will be timing public comment 3 minutes per comment. So I would like to pass it off to Chair Blundy.
Good evening, everyone. If you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. My screen's a little weird. Fred, are you here?
I'm here.
John?
Present.
Thank you. Dan?
I'm here as well.
James?
I'm here as well.
Okay, and I'm here, so we're all here. Thank you for that. Kurt, is there any COVID update?
I do not have an update this evening.
Thank you. Moving right along to agenda item number 5, community announcements. Monica?
So we have a lot going on right now. Parks and Recreation, digital recreation opportunities continue, and you can go to the LMT website to register for those. Also, March 29th through April 1st, we will be hosting an egg extravaganza where we will head out into the parks and hide eggs, open to anybody in the township to find. If you find them, you'll bring them to the community center, and we will give you a prize for your egg. We also have a 10K a day, 6-week Stepping into Summer challenge. You can sign up today. The registration is active. All participants will receive a custom 10K t-shirt. And if you finish the challenge, then you will get a medal at the end. So you can go on to our website to find out more information about that. We're also putting together activity bags for our seniors. We have had so many great donations for this. We're very excited. We have about 75 seniors who are participating. These are activity bags, goodies, treats. If you want to donate, don't hesitate to reach out to us to let us know. You can dial 267-274-1111. And again, pool registration is open. Register today. The 5th is the last day to get the discount for residents. So it's important that you register today if you want that discount. And then we also have, this is the time that callers would call in if they have any community announcements, and we do have someone on the line. John loved to talk about the first ever Jack Pepper 3v3 basketball tournament. So we're going to bring him in.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the invite. My name is John Love. I'm actually with Falcons Elite. That's a newly formed youth basketball organization in the Pennsbury school district area. I'm actually a former teacher at Pennsbury. My wife is a teacher at Makefield Elementary. And the other guys involved are Justin Baxter, Kurt Bourbon, and Mike Higgins, all Pennsbury grads. We coached at Pennsbury for a while with Frank Ciola, still good friends with Frank, watching Ava. Deeply rooted in the basketball community and in Pennsbury. We've been doing some things over the last couple of weeks, actually months since MLK Day, did a couple fundraisers and offering just an outlet for kids to get out into, just be active and play basketball and do some things like that. With the passing of Jack Pepper, who we've known the Peppers forever, we thought it would be, a good idea to bring people together to raise money for American Cancer Society. I've been talking with Cheryl Pepper, and we're going to be holding this event at Charles Bame. Actually, it's going to be at all 3 middle schools, 3-on-3 tournament for grades 3 through 12, and everything that all the proceeds that we raise, whether it be through kids signing up or through businesses sponsoring us, we're reaching out to that. we're in the process of doing that right now. Will go towards American Cancer Society. So just wanted to put that out there. I talked to Monica yesterday, and she had said it would be a good idea for me to hop on this call. So appreciate the time.
John, how do people register?
I'm sorry. Yes, they can go to Falcons Elite hoops.com, and there's a registration link there. Also on social media, Facebook. There's also, if they search that as well, they can find us. And also to I think our social media is really good. Email as well is on there. So if somebody isn't sure, they can always reach out to us, and we respond very quickly to anybody who's inquiring.
Okay, John, and I guess we will also be putting the link on our website on the Parks and Recreation page, so we can get to you that way also.
Awesome. That would be great.
Okay, good. Thank you for calling in today.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
And there's no further calls on the line.
Do any of the supervisors have any announcements? Dan?
Less of an announcement and more of a thank you to the Public Works Department. After, I don't know how many snowstorms we've had in the last several weeks. Still seeing snow in the front yard in March around here is amazing. But I just wanted to say that they did an incredible job. We had the first storm that was over a couple of days. They got ahead of it quickly, got it done and made the road safe. And then not too long after that, we had a couple of messy storms right following that were both icy and snowy. And they did a great job doing that. I was out shoveling one night, and Mr. Hucklebridge was driving by my house, going through the different neighborhoods, and I happened to be outside and was talking to him. And you could tell that he and his crew have put in some pretty long hours. So I think we need to collectively say, job well done, pat everyone on the back, and thought it was pretty good. As sort of a segue out of that, though, it's also a public safety announcement I have tonight, too. With all that snow, even though it is March now, I had become, I was thinking that ticks wouldn't be quite an issue this year so early, and I found several on my dogs, and unfortunately my daughter in the last couple of days, which required a very quick first aid thing. So just a reminder that ticks are out already. And to please keep an eye out for them and check yourself. And as the country song says, let's check each other for ticks, I believe is some bad lyric on that one. But just a heads up that they are out there and they are thriving, unfortunately. So that's all I have for this evening.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, then moving along to agenda item number 6. Consider approval of the minutes from February 17th, 2021. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, James and John. Is there any discussion? Any public comment?
No public comment.
Thank you. Then with that, I call the vote. All those in favor of approving approval of the motion, signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Agenda item number 7, engineers report.
Yes, hello, supervisors. I will dive right into the agenda item here. The first item is the award of the base bid for the road program and alternates 1 through 3 for the road program. If you'll remember, at the last meeting, we had discussed it, and there was an award contingent upon a review period for the public to review the qualifications for Harris Blacktopping. We have not received any comments on Harris Blacktopping or their question, or anyone calling into question their qualifications, and thus we are asking for the award of the base bid and alternates 1 through 3 for the 2021 Liquid Fuels Road Program to Harris Blacktopping, Inc. in the amount of $642,892.85.
So moved.
Thank you, Dan.
Second.
Thank you, James. Sorry, John. Is there any discussion? Yes, Dan?
Yeah, quick question, Andy. Have they've checked all the boxes for paperwork that they need to have into you and all that?
Yes, they did. We received the hard copies for the bid bond. You can even see the raised seal for the notary. So,
Nice.
yeah, we have everything.
Good. And Kurt, as I recall, this is just, I like to get this stuff on the record because it's good stuff. I believe our budget was for about 650 with three fewer roads on the list, and we managed to come in still under the budget with still adding 3 roads that were on next year's list. So that's a win for everyone. Is that correct?
That's
All
correct.
very correct. Yes.
It's good to hear. Thanks.
Any other supervisors? No coughing, Fred. Is there any public comment, Monica?
There's no public comment.
Okay, then with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to the next agenda item is the consideration to advertise the entrance improvements project at the Township Community Center. We had met with Monica and Parks and Rec Department to review some upgrades that they wanted at the community center. Most notably, the entrance vestibule will be changing the doors to a more user-friendly door. They'll be more durable. They'll be lighter, easier to open for seniors and children. And they will also have a automatic push-button open. We've put together a bid package to be bid on pen bid. So the schedule then would be contingent upon authorization tonight. Would be advertising on this Friday, which is the 5th, advertising next Tuesday on the 9th, and then opening bids on April 1st, which would be a Thursday. So then a potential award would be the first meeting in April. And just to kind of, as an FYI, we did reach out to a couple of vendors or potential bidders to determine if this would come in at a price over the threshold for public bidding. And 2 vendors responded and indicated that it would. So yes, we're proceeding with publicly bidding this on pen bid. We're asking for your authorization of that.
Yes, Kurt?
So Andy, you're being modest here with something. I also do want to bring up that Andy forwarded the documents and had input from the Disability Advisory Board regarding these doors, where they actually did have some comments, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, a couple of their comments you incorporated into this document as well.
That's true.
To include the committee, they gave their feedback, and we actually had something that Andy felt we could incorporate into that as well.
Thank you. So with that, is there a motion? Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to advertise the entrance improvements project at the Township Community Center.
Thank you, Fred. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, James. Is there any discussion? Yes, Dan?
Must be the beard. We're starting to look alike, I guess. Sorry, James. So these, Andy, what's the, you mentioned that it looked like it was going to be above the bid requirement. What are we looking at generally for a cost? I know we had an estimate in the budget, but I'm curious if we're close to that based on preliminary discussions.
I tend to not want to give out our estimate in advance of publicly bidding it out. I will say that the threshold for public bid is $21,300. I would say that we're not far over it, but over it.
where we I'll ask it. I understand what you're doing. In our budget, were we over the threshold for bidding? Okay, I just want to make sure that we're within range is what I'm getting at. Of what you're hearing is if I'm reading between the lines. So that's number one. Number two, and this is more for history than anyone's involved sitting here tonight. Those doors are only a handful of years old at most, right? The existing doors. But we found that we already have to replace them because they're not serving the purpose that we want them to serve. I guess I can say it that way to allow for access. So that being said, Kurt, Dave, Andy, I'm just curious because, and this is, it's not $300,000, but over 21,000 some odd dollars is still a fair chunk of change for something we just bought, right? We just paid for. So was there anything that we saw in our review of the existing doors that they weren't the right doors? They weren't built. There was any deficiency where we could get some sort of I don't know. Can we be made whole somehow without having to spend all the money ourselves? I know we need to replace the doors for a variety of reasons, but is there anything? What can you say around that?
The only thing that I would say is that these are wood door. The existing doors are wood doors with glass panels in them. They're generally wood doors are generally more residential in nature, but I don't know that that's enough evidence to say that this is definitely not a commercial to proceed with that. What we're proposing is aluminum and glass.
Yeah, I'm just want to make sure. And so, Kurt, I'll say one more thing. I know you want to jump in. I'm curious because, like you're saying, were they built to spec? Were they all that stuff? Did they meet what they were supposed to meet per the spec that was put out? Did the architect or whoever designed the door that they were supposed to? It goes down the line. Did the architect or whoever designed the door they were supposed to? And was that particular door that was designed installed correctly, et cetera, and then and if it was, maybe shame on the township. I know no one here was there related to that for not doing a better job then, and we're just dealing with it. But I'm just, if we can save some of that money, I would, obviously would be preferable.
The only thing that I would say is it does predate me, and so I have no knowledge of whether anything was done incorrectly or not. I don't. I believe that there was grant funding for the community center, and everything was in accordance with that grant. And so I will say this: that in this current project, we are asking to salvage the doors, and thus. Maybe if they can be used somewhere else within the township, then the contractor can hand them over and we can use them somewhere else that might be a more appropriate use.
So Dan, I don't know if I'm answering your question here, but as you know, in that building, there were a lot of things as the project went on that got scaled back, including the building not being wired when it was built. I'm sure that was not the way it would have been spec'd out. My understanding is that this originally was spec'd out to have commercial grade doors, and that was something that was scaled back as the project went on, and costs maybe exceeded what the original projections were. So, much like we had to go back and make sure it was wired after the fact is something I think is comparable with this example as well.
And that's my understanding too, Kurt. It's just frustrating to hear it. Well, and it has nothing to do with this whole group. It's just frustrating to hear. Yeah.
I mean, and down there, in the end, these are supposed to be ADA accessible doors, where people can't, much like you said, they're difficult to open. They're also residential grade doors that if someone wanted to really try to pop and rip those open, we're vulnerable to that. So, we upgrade those doors. We make them the way that, frankly, they should have been all along. We make them accessible the way it should have been all along. And I hear what you're saying. I'm not a lawyer. I would defer to a lawyer to say if there's something with that we could recoup.
I'm going to give the typical lawyer's answer. It depends. These are all good questions. I'd have to look at all the documents that were referenced already and any of the reviews that were done by anybody who was charged with inspecting them and whether there was any kind of lack of sufficient review and that kind of thing before I could give an answer. But I share everybody's frustration too, because obviously it's something as Supervisor Grenier points out, this has been, the building is 4 years old, maybe 5 at most. So it would seem to be unfortunate this has to be done right away. But I mean, if the board wants me to, I can look into it. But obviously I'll have to coordinate with Andy and probably Jim Majewski to look at that as well. So
Jim is here. Jim, can you chime in a little bit if you would?
Sure. The doors that are in the community center were what was spec'd out by the architect. They were installed properly. The problem is that for a high-use public building, the doors really aren't suitable. They just selected a lower quality door than what should have been put into a community center.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions from the supervisors?
Suzanne?
Yes, Fred.
No, just, we mentioned that the Disability Advisory Board was consulted as far as these doors are concerned. I just wanted to make sure that at the last meeting, which was Monday, they reiterated their concerns about how the doors would open. And Andrew, as long as you have that spec'd out in the bid, I don't think there should be a problem.
We do.
Great. Thank you both. Anyone else? Is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
Okay. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 8, project updates.
Thank you. I do want to put a few comments on a couple of these things so the board's aware. Item A, township properties. So I want to give a more specific update. Dan had asked me a question that I gave a specifically ambiguous answer to Dan's question at the last meeting. So we had a follow-up meeting with staff and with Andy regarding the inventory that you all have. There has been points in time over the last number of years where certain properties have had cost estimates done for the rehabilitation, essentially to make them usable or habitable structures. We are in the midst of having staff internally go back over those numbers, add inflationary increases to them, even walk around the properties to make sure there's nothing that has changed marketably in those estimates or in those repair guidelines. There's a couple of the properties that have not had estimates done, most notably the barn, the one barn at the farm, and the golf house. So we've asked Remington Vernick to prepare for us sort of a range in costs as far as what the main issues would be, to be able to give a range as far as what it would cost to accomplish those objectives. So we focused on the Patterson Farm properties. We're going to focus on the golf house. We are not going to sit, frankly, and give a cost estimate, for example, on the Farringer house that currently has a tenant in it, or a couple of those properties. If that's something that the board wants, we can backtrack and do that. But I think essentially we're going to put the report together with what we think of as the properties that we really want to focus on, that wouldn't have tenants in them and that truly are assets in the township. So that process is underway. We've engaged Andy and Remington Vernick to take the two properties that I've outlined And we'll meet again early next week as far as establishing a specific timeline for all of you that report will be updated beyond just the inventory to include those estimates and lists of things that we believe would need to be undertaken to make them structurally sound. Again, we're not talking about, I say this jokingly, but I've had these questions. We're not talking about, will we put marble countertops in something? We're essentially talking about what it would take that someone could walk in there safely to essentially have a shell to then do something with to make them safe. So that is underway. I don't think it'll take us long. Remington Vernick will get underway fairly quickly. We already have the numbers on many of those properties, as I said, and I'll have a time frame for you probably before the next meeting, but at least by the next meeting to present when we'll have that. As a reminder to everybody, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, Suzanne, do you mind if I ask Kurt a question on that real quick? So,
sorry, Suzanne.
One of the things, I know Supervisor Blundy has mentioned this in the past, and I want to support her in this as best we can in terms of starting to come up with active, true blue plans for how to address these, future uses, et cetera. In the analysis, and I know you talked about making them structurally sound, this isn't necessarily considering the future plan for use of a certain structure, whatever, because some of these may have been used as a home before, but may be better served as, I don't know, I'm making this up, so no one hold me to this, a bed and breakfast or something in the future, or something totally different. The analysis, and that would be determined by other means, obviously, but when Andy's crew does their analysis for cost estimates, there's the base cost for making it so you don't get hurt walking in the door. Is there an opportunity to get a huge rough order of magnitude cost for making it usable without specifying a use, just to get, because the next step in the process, right, is to take that information and then start to look at how we're going to implement some type of, develop a plan how to implement it. So we want to get some feel for where'd Kurt go? There he is. Something that feeds into further discussion and further planning. So I'm wondering if we can incorporate that on a very high level. Obviously, not every widget that we want to deal with.
I think so, Dan. I mean, some of the stuff, listen, as more of a layperson in these things, some of these things are more obvious things to me. There's problems with the foundation. The roof needs replaced. There's asbestos lined pipes. The floor is sinking. We have to look at the foundation and evaluate it. But then, let's just take the golf house as an example. The golf house has a certain layout to it that would, essentially, probably have a limited scope, at least as it currently is framed for use in such a way. So I hear what you're saying, and what I'd say is we would start with a report with some estimates with the outlines. That if the board wants to go further in the weeds on things, we could pick it up, and go further. I think my objective here, like I think as you indicated, was to get the ball rolling here with a process that we can start to identify these things. As a reminder, this, Dan, that Remington Vernick put together price estimates on Satterthwaite House, which were, I think at the time, about $700,000 for the structural improvements of the house. And then there was also environmental remediation that was estimated as well, the cost could certainly be beyond that, but it was a good guideline for the board to understand what we were talking about if we start looking to put investments into these properties. So I would view all of these properties essentially that same way.
Gotcha. Good. Thank you.
Okay. Suzanne, real quick, I want to remind the board as well on project updates that the bids are due March 8th for Sandy Run. We have this on PennBid where you can go see who's picked up the packets. We've had quite a bit of activity on it. I'm going to say a dozen or more that have gotten the packets. We know who some of those are. We will be doing some follow-up to hopefully nudge along a very competitive process. For that, our hope then is to have that before all of you at the next meeting to award, which I think we're all enthused about. So I'll keep you in the loop and get the board the information as we open those bids next week. That's all I have for right now. I don't know if there's any questions about any of that.
Okay.
Okay, you want me to go next?
Sure.
So the first item I have for your consideration is, if you'll recall, the board recently approved the purchase of 2 mowers on the golf course. At the time, Mike Atera had gotten quotes through CoStars that I believed we could do better than what those quotes were. We put that out. TD Bank was the low bidder. It's 3 years, quarterly payments at 2.4% for those mowers. Again, that will be an item. And Dan, I know this would be, I'm trying to anticipate Dan's questions. That would be an item that will land in the golf budget as far as an obligation of golf course. So again, 2.4%, which the other bid that came in was 3.9. TD tends to be extremely competitive with these rates. We do put it out for anybody that offers a lease to purchase program, and they were the low bidder. I'm asking for consideration for approval.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, John. Any discussion? Yes, Dan?
I didn't even raise my hand yet. I know. Kurt, the other question that goes with that, I guess, is it's in the golf. These were in the budget for golf in 2021, and yes, and then we're at the budget number.
We are, as you know, we reconfigured some numbers around, so we've landed essentially in the same spot under the capital plan. We budgeted $60,000 in capital, which originally the discussion was that would all go into bunker upgrades that we do. We've lowered the bunker number down per that presentation to the board to about 40,000 or so, and then this will fill in the difference that will be in that $60,000 budget line item.
Any nuances surrounding the 2.4 versus, say, a 3.9%? Any hidden conditions or anything like that we need to be careful of, or is it just a straight 2.4? It's
just straight 2.4, and as part of that, when we talk with them, they've eliminated all of their filing fees and everything as well. So there's not even an upfront cost of $100 or $200 to process. It's straight 2.4. First payment would be due in April. So there would be 3 quarterly payments this year, which fits right in with what the presentation was before, or at the previous meeting.
Thanks.
Any other discussion? Monica, is there any comment, public comment?
There is no public comment.
With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Moving on, Kurt.
Thank you. I want to give a little context back if I could here. So if you'll recall, last year, we had the pandemic hit, about this time last year. We had awarded the painting contract for the pools last year, and literally a week later is when all of the shutdowns occurred. So we did not paint pools last year. This year, and so because we had already awarded it, we had purchased the paint from the vendor who had ordered it right at the time we had awarded. So we've actually been holding that paint in the township. So we rebid it this year to paint all of the pools. And because we kept that paint, we obviously put in the documents that they would utilize that paint, lowering the cost this year. So I'm asking for consideration. I'm just going to the item. Sorry, give me 1 second. So in your packet, you'll have seen a memorandum from Jim Majewski. We did receive 2 bidders. We did receive 2 bids. The bidder that was the low bidder actually came to the site, walked the site, I should believe even talked with staff. And the low bidder was for $39,180. We budgeted $36,000 for this, so it's a tiny bit over, but it is to paint all 4 pools. They do need it, and we're making the recommendation to approve the pool painting to Titan Industrial Services, Inc. at a cost of $39,180.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Fred.
Second.
Thank you, John. Any discussion? Yes, Dan. Oh, sorry, Dan. Wait your turn.
Florida.
James?
Gonna ask my Dan question. So, Kurt, I'm assuming this is what was budgeted for, obviously, for that. Now, that's again, as far as where it comes out of budget-wise, that's part of the pool expenditures.
Is so we budgeted 36,000 for it. Obviously, this is a bit over that, but I mean, within less than 10% or so. So, we'll have to watch the money. But I mean, again, this is to paint all four. We're coming off of, none of them being painted essentially for multiple years, and they need it. But yes, that would come directly out of the pool budget.
And then my follow-up question is more technical. The paint's been sitting for a year. Is there any issues with the quality of the paint if it's been sitting for that long?
I don't think so. It's been sitting there for two of the pools. The other two pools the contractor will be bringing the paint themselves. But we had this discussion a year or so ago, and we felt that it would hold. A lot of these pools were repainting, like the Olympic pool essentially would be something that we would typically paint every year. So I wouldn't foresee that there would be a problem using that paint.
Okay. So
Dan? Oh, sorry, James. Good.
No, I was just saying, go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, and Kurt, you partially answered the question I was going to ask, actually, by rough two questions, really. One is, what's the rough estimate of how long it's been since the different pools have been painted? And then how long do we think, I know you just said that the Olympic pool probably gets painted every year, but how long do you think these paint jobs are good for, typically, plus or minus? 2 years?
2 years, yeah. 2 years. Just so the board knows, when we bought that paint, the cost of buying that paint was not inconsequential. It was, I believe it was $13,000 or $14,000 we paid for that paint. So, we did, listen, at the time, if you remember, we had already awarded that contract. So we worked with the company to say, listen, like, we'll pay for your paint. Like, I didn't want the business to go under. We weren't going to use the pool. So we gladly did that. And, I would say the smaller pools, the kiddie pool, what have you, the lap pool may be every other year. The Olympic pool likely every year.
Okay. What color do you have, Kurt? I know, Suzanne, we were joking about this before, but
Not a joke.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Is it to Mr. Majewski's liking, since he will spend most of the time looking at it?
I was going to say, use that paint in the lap pool. No.
Exactly.
I can answer that question. It's the same as always. It's the white.
And after with the year of the pool being closed, Jim would probably swim in a pond if we had it. So
I'm sure.
I do plan to do an underwater inspection of all of the pools.
There's no further discussion? Is there any public comment, Monica?
There's no public comment.
With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye, raising your hand.
Aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0.
thank you. Monica's Fred here.
Yes, he is. We'll bring him in.
So while Fred's coming in, I just want to give some context here. So there's a variety of motions on here for 2021 and our sewer capital program. But Fred has prepared, because I figured there'd be questions regarding the status of our program from last year that's wrapping up with the sewer lining. We have the pump stations that are going on. So I think Fred's prepared to give a presentation. We have 3 or 4 motions for you to consider this evening, some for advertising, some for some change orders and some payments on the current plan. So Fred, it's all yours.
Good. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right. Super. Kirk, can we put up the PowerPoint presentation? Good. What I want to do is first give you an update on the 2020 projects and where we're at on that, and then discuss 2 projects that are ready to be bid in as part of the 2021, and 2 additional projects that will be ready to bid hopefully in April. So if we can switch to the next screen. The first project is the existing contract, SDR 20-1. This is a cured-in-place pipeliner. Construction was substantially complete on January 25th. The contractor is completing the closeout documents. There were 2 issues during construction. One, we had a minor bulge that occurred, which would have restricted the capacity of the pipe. The contractor performed that, repaired that at no cost to Lower Makefield Township. The second item, which is subject to a change order, is that we had a ruptured hose pipe, which caused the liner to burst. Basically, what we do is we televise it's a vitrified clay pipe in this case. We get out through and prior to the installation of the liner and make sure that there's no visible pipe defects or anything that during the insertion of the liner that would cause us an issue. There were no visible here. However, we can't see behind the pipe. When the contractor was inverting or inserting the liner using the inversion method, the hose pipe broke, vitrified clay pipe broke, which we believe is because there most likely was no backfill behind the pipe to resist the forces. And that's one of the reasons that we're doing this project, is because there's issues with the pipe due to underground springs, things of that nature that wash out backfill. So the contractor put us a change order together. We then negotiated with the contractor because while we can't prove that there was no backfill, we can't prove there was an issue for that he didn't cause that during the inversion process. So the negotiator was that he would not charge us for any labor or equipment, but just for the materials of the liner that was ripped and the replacement liner, as well as in repairing the existing pipe. So what I'm asking for consideration by the board is consideration change order number 2 in the amount of $17,685. This was reviewed by the sewer authority, and the sewer authority did recommend approval of this change order.
Is there a motion? Thank you, Fred. Do I hear a second? Thank you, James. Is there any discussion? I can't see everybody because of the presentation. So Dan, do you have something to say?
Sure, I guess I have a question. So when did the pipe rupture, Fred?
During the inversion process. Well, the inversion process, basically we blow in the liner, gets inserted using air pressure. And as it was going in and unfolding through in there, the pipe broke. When the pipe broke, it then the vitrified clay pipe, which is almost like clay pipe, cut the liner. And once the liner was cut, it couldn't be utilized.
When was that? Like December, January?
Oh yes. I can tell you exactly the date. November 18th.
Oh, okay.
It was November.
And then they moved on with the project, finished it up.
Yep, they finished it up. They repaired it. They did it. We obviously had to do an emergency repair, immediately because a lot of water rushed in. I mean, we probably had almost a 3/4 full pipe for about 4 hours, 4 to 5 hours, because of the groundwater table.
Did that have any downstream impacts? Any outside the pipe? Were there any issues that we had to deal with? With residents or roads or anything else?
Nope.
Oh, good.
Contractor did a good job. We only had one minor issue where he previously had permission and parked in front of a driveway. And then he did it again without asking the person. The resident called us. But other than that, no issues at all. She was a beautiful lady. I mean, she was a great lady. I stayed on the phone with her while they literally moved that truck out of the way. So that was, it was a trailer actually, but yes, that was the only issue that we had. There was a issue with a stormwater grate that got broken by a truck parking on it, and they replaced that. I believe that were the only two issues. For working in people's backyards during a very wet period of time, it went very well.
Good. And the payment requests, that's it? There's no monies outstanding after this?
No, that's not true.
Okay.
After this payment request, the payment request does include this change order. I still have the 5% retainage because I wanted to hold that until I got all the paperwork completed and reviewed and approved. And I will be back next month on both of these contracts, this contract and the manhole liner, just for the replacement retainage. But I wanted to run this through the board so that way, in case there was an issue or something happened, that I still had that 5%.
Gotcha. And then just because we're towards the end here of this one project, what bottom line number, how do we end up versus the budget versus the bid?
We ended up actually being, the total change orders is 9.5%. We included a 10% contingency. So we're well below that. But as you'll remember, this bid was significantly lower than our estimate because of the volume. So we are well within the budget, even with this change order.
Good stuff. Thank you. That's all I have, Suzanne. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Monica, is there any public comment?
There's no public comment on this.
With that, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, John, so you're an aye?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Second action item on this contract is consideration of payment request number 2 in the amount of $44,045.50. This does include the change order amount that was just approved, minus the 5%, minus a 5% retainage on that. This payment request was reviewed and approved by the Sewer Authority at their meeting on the 25th of February.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
I'll give that to Dan with a second to Fred. Is there any discussion? Yes, Kurt?
I want to make the point for the board, just so it's clear. When we cut a check to the developer, it's going to be for $44,000, right? The actual amount of the payment, if you took out the change order, was the 44 minus 17. So that would be like, what, 26,300, then the change order for 17,685. But we had to do the change order first to authorize the $44,000 payment, if that makes sense.
Any other discussion? Monica, is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and raising their hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to agenda item F.
Not quite there yet.
Sorry?
Can you turn the page, please, Kurt? Next contract was just an update on the sanitary sewer manhole rehabilitation contract. This contract could not have gone cleaner, easier, or nicer. Construction was completed on December 11th. Certificate of substantial completion was signed and authorized on February 17th. The only thing that we're doing is we're holding $3,220 of retainage until we get all the maintenance bonds and everything like that approved by our solicitor. But a model project. Couldn't have asked for anything better from these guys. And so there's no action items required on this project tonight. Kurt, next page, unless the board has any questions on that one. Next one is contract 20-3. This is the Brookstone Pump Station. The contractor mobilized on February, update. We went out and put notifications to every resident in that area, coordinated with the homeowners association, so everyone was well aware of that. Even though the bypass pumping and things are all done with electric pumps, so there should be no notice. This project is very close to a lot of residents. So we try to go above and beyond to provide notice to everyone and communicate effectively through the HOA, as well as literally putting taping notices on the door. Just during COVID, my guys go out masked. We'll basically knock on the door and we'll sticky on the front door the notice for them, so that way they don't have to interact but providing them with all the contact information. And the only comments that we've had back from the public on that is to thank us for effectively communicating with them. So that's going well so far. Knock on wood, is very early in this job. Contractor mobilized on February 15th. They did establish the bypass pumping and demolition on February 18th. We obviously have been delayed a little bit with the snowfall that we've had recently. So construction is supposed to take 3 weeks, but we've probably lost a week just with the snow on that one. But they are out there working. I believe almost all of the demolition's been done. Contractors actually done some upgrades for free for us, utilizing flowable fill rather than stone, because it saved them labor in exchange for the extra materials. But that job's going very well. And all the materials came in very quickly on this job. It's ironic because the next job that we'll talk about, we've had significant delays in the materials, basically because of the generator. Unless the board has any other questions on the Brookstone pump station upgrade, we can move on to the next item. Kirk, can we get to the next one? And Susan, if I'm missing somebody on the screen, give me the high sign. This is the relocation and replacement of the Stackhouse pump station. This one we have had tremendous delays, mostly in the generator, in getting that, and actually pipes and valves have been a delay. But the shop drawings are all approved. We're just waiting for all the equipment to be delivered. The reason we're doing this is that this job is, especially the sanitary sewer main, is basically on the edge of the banks of the canal. So I don't want to go out, mobilize, disturb this, and then disappear for 3 or 4 weeks or 2 months waiting for a part or something so that I can complete the job and have the contractor mobilizing and have this disturbed behind that. So we're waiting until all the materials are in the contractor shop to go out, mobilize, and quickly construct this job. We have gone out and met with the homeowners on the tree removal. There are trees that are in our easement that we have to go down, and we've gone through and marked them, taking pictures with both the contractor and the homeowner. So there's no question as to what trees we're taking down. Some trees are on the border of the easement, and I wanted to make sure that they were acceptable for us to take them down so that we aren't required to go back out. That was one of the kind of homeowners. We're meeting with the other homeowner who's been on vacation, but when they're both back in town, it's 2 sisters that own a house, the middle missus, and when they're there, we'll be there. But so this one, we are pushing the contractor on construction updates. I did not get one this last week and a half, but I will be asking him for that, and I have asked. He just hasn't gotten a response back from his vendors. So unless the board has any questions on this contract, I think we're ready to go on to the proposed contracts for.
Fred, can you hold it for a second? Supervisor Dan has a question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So, Fred, I'm just looking at the notation here. So 20-4D, 20 denotes a 2020 project.
Yes.
Is okay. Is this the last of the 2020 projects?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So we still have we've got a couple that just finished or are finishing up, and we got this one that's getting ready to rock and roll soon.
Yep. They're all awarded at the same time.
Yeah, that's how they go sometimes.
Yep.
How are we assuming this one goes as bid? Hate to assume sometimes, but how are we doing budget versus what we're actually looking at spend for 2020 specifically?
We're actually going to be very close because we had to adjust the contract. So while we were under on the lining and the manhole contracts, we actually had to increase this contract by about $50,000 over the original budget. And we discussed that at the board meeting. So the net result is we're going to be very, very close, still allowing for a 10% contingency on these 2 outstanding contracts to what our budget was in 2020.
I thought our budget in 2020, when we talked about this back, I don't know, August, September, October, whatever it was like we were saving close to, I'm kind of making a number up, but this is my memory of it, something like 125K under overall across all projects.
It was just under 100,000, I remember. If you take 10% contingencies out, And I believe that this job came in, it was around 50,000. So that's where I'm saying we have about 50,000 under probably what our budget in 2020. So that's really where we're at. It could be slightly more if we don't use any of the 10% contingencies, but it's not 100,000 under, unfortunately.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. And the other $17,000 change order, the reason it came down from 100 down to I said the 85 was I took the $17,000 change order into account there. So that's why the number got reduced.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Anybody else? Okay, then Fred, you can continue, please.
Good. We have two contracts for your consideration tonight, which are continuation contracts as part of our corrective action plan. The first one is the sanitary sewer manhole rehabilitation. This is required by our corrective action plan, technically only in the Neshaminy interceptor, but we have agreed that we have to address the I&I in the Morrisville as well. And this is really for the structural repair of deteriorating manholes. The total 2021 budget line item for this is approximately $36,050. We have, once again, we've broken it up into the two service areas. The Neshaminy portion is we have 3 manholes. They are all manholes are the discharge of existing pump stations that show active deterioration in them. The engineer's cost estimate is $13,942.50. And it's slightly lower than our budget, but I'm doing that to allow for any change orders that may occur so that we stay within our budget. In the Morrisville Municipal Sewer Authority area, there's 4 manholes. Number one of the manholes, we actually lined this sanitary sewer main as part of the lining project. And as we did that, we identified a manhole that had a significant I&I leak. We were able to temporarily plug it, but we wanted to come back in here and do a permanent fix on that because that plug won't last for long. We basically put non-shrink grout or putty in a hole just to hold it. Other 2 show active deterioration that our operations staff, while they've been out, these actually aren't directly downstream of a force main, but for whatever reason, sewer gases, maybe due to sag or other items, had deteriorated this concrete enough that it was significant and noticeable. And they have pretty significant structural defects that we're able to catch. Thankfully, our operator, and Chris, your operator, did a very good job in notifying us. And the last manhole is a force main discharge. And that manhole actually isn't in bad shape yet, but it clearly is going to be attacked in the near future, But our cost there, once again, is $18,590. The budget's $20,600, slightly under for 2 reasons. Number one, it costs so much to do a manhole, and it'd be over. And 2, to allow allowance for any change orders. I am more worried about change orders on this one, only because of the existing leak that's in the one manhole. We may have to go in and do another temporary repair just so it's dry out enough for this. But this contract was recommended to be bid by the Sewer Authority on February 25th. And we're requesting authorization to bid this via pen bid by the Board of Supervisors.
Yes, Kurt.
So Fred, not to derail your presentation, but my question for you. So this is item G on the agenda, right? We had that item F for that electric.
Oh, shoot. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So Suzanne, whatever your pleasure is here, if you want him to step back and we go back to F, or if you, which we could, or if you want to go out of order, that's your call.
I do like order. Monica, is there anyone on the line right now?
Not for this.
Okay, then if it's all right with the other supervisors, if we could please consider a motion for item G, which is to advertise the sewer manhole lining for 2021.
So moved.
Thank you, Fred. A second to James. Is there any discussion? Go ahead, Dan.
Fred, you mentioned one of the manholes wasn't in terrible shape right now. What's the unit cost if we were to remove that one from the package?
It's relatively low, maybe around $2,500. The concern that I have on that is it's a discharge to the Maple Vale force main. Because we're pumping it at a greater rate, and is that the detention time in the force main is going to increase over time. So I do believe that it will. We will have hydrogen sulfide tack in there, but you would save about $2,500. Unfortunately, this manhole is the shortest out of the 4 manholes, and it's basically on a vertical foot basis. So you have a nominal savings there.
Okay. And Maple Vale, last year, the year before, I think it was pre-COVID. I think they had a major backup in the road there.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
I just was curious.
Yep.
Any other discussion? Monica, is there any public comment yet?
No public comment.
Okay, so with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raising your hands.
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. So Fred, could we backstep then to
Yes.
agenda item F?
Yes. Addendum item F is payment request number 2 for the Brookstone Pump Station upgrade. This is for the electrical contractor who is mobilized and starting work. The majority of this work is for stored materials and work completed to date. And we are still holding a 10% retainage because less than 50% of the job is completed.
Thank you.
So I'd be looking for recommendation for payment request number 2 in the amount of $8,100 to AJM Electric.
Is there a motion? Thank you, Fred. Second?
Second.
Thank you, John. Any discussion? Thank you, Dan. Monica, is there any public comment?
There's no public comment.
With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye, raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0. Back to H now. Fred?
Yep. Excuse me. And this is request to advertise for contract SWR 21-2. This is a sanitary sewer cured in place pipeliner contract. Once again, this is a requirement of our PADEP corrective action plan. And main thing is to remove existing I&I, and we saw a significant, there were a lot of significant leaks that were done in the first pipelining contract. And as I'll discuss later on, this will address the, actually, can you flip the screen? Sorry, you're reading. And it provides a permanent repair to the sanitary sewer mains. And as I'm going to discuss here, basically one of these projects in the Chamonix is really a continuation of what we had done in 2020. That we are able to, we kind of leapfrogged an area. We're able to fill that center gap in and continue it upstream on this. Because basically when you fix a leak in a sanitary sewer main, it goes to the next weakest link. So by having a continuation project is the best way to permanently remove it. And the majority of these are going to, no, the majority, they are going to pump stations where we're having hydraulic issues. So we're like in there. So our 2021 budget is approximately $401,700 with $180,250 going to the Chamonix and $221,450 to the Marshville Municipal Authority portion. In the Chamonix service area, we're going to be doing approximately 3,078 linear feet of sanitary sewer main. This is a continuation of basically the project that we had done last year down in this area. This is down in the Falls service area or contract area down along the lake. And this is also where we had seen the leaking manhole down in there. So that has an engineer's cost of $177,291.40. Which is close, but does contain a 10% contingency. Once again, there is always the risk of a change order on these jobs because we don't know what's behind any of those pipes. I only know what the inside of the pipe looks like and not what the backfill around it looks like. So that's always an issue. The second one is for the Morrisville area, service area. This is to line approximately 1,900 linear feet of 10-inch sewer main and 1,723 linear feet of 12-inch main. And what I'm going to talk about, one of the next projects, we are going to have a second lining project that we done this year for the Buck Creek. This is actually a portion of the Buck Creek that we know has not been lined and is in poor shape. And I'll discuss the Buck Creek lining, which is part of our budget next. But what I'm looking for is authorization to bid that. This was recommended, reviewed with the Sewer Authority and recommended be bid at the authority meeting on February 25th. So what I'm requesting is authorization to bid this from the Board of Supervisors.
So moved.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you, James, for the second. Sometimes you guys will unmute yourself, but for now I'll just talk. Is there any discussion, Dan?
Sure. Fred, what's the you're looking to bid these? Obviously not. Have you designed these projects yet, or are they under design right now?
Oh no, these are all done and being reviewed by the solicitor's office right now, and they're literally ready. My guy asked me if he could wait till Monday to put it on pen bid because he liked to take Friday afternoon off. But no, they'll be bid next week. They'll be on pen bid the following week.
And then from bid to construction, what's the schedule?
I usually give them 120 days to complete it. So it's between 90 and 120 days. So I would say that these jobs will be done before the, June, July. They'll be completed.
Okay. So if they're not, that puts us right up against when we anticipate a sale closing on the sewer system. So there's some question in my mind. I'm curious what that means to if somehow things happen, things get slowed up, for whatever reason. That's construction.
Yeah.
What happens if one of these gets slowed up and we close on the sale of the sewer and we're not done with the project yet? Is that on us or is that on the purchaser of the sewer system? How does that work?
I'll tell you to get a legal opinion, but what I would say is the contract is with you, and therefore you would be required to complete that contract because that would be your obligation. And my concern is kind of the exact opposite of that, is that what happens if the sale is delayed and closing is delayed, and I am not in compliance with the corrective action plan, and I'm jeopardizing the ability to have EDUs released under the connection management plan for all the projects that we have going through the approval process right now.
Have you had any discussions with DEP about compliance issues? Have they had any issues with corrective action plans?
They haven't so far, and that's why all of our EDUs are there. And, obviously last year I did have discussions with them and said, listen, we got delayed by COVID. So some of our projects, although they're bid, are carrying over into 2021, and they had no issue with that. But because of that, I don't want to be in that same position. I can ask for forgiveness once, but not twice. And I don't want to jeopardize any projects that the Board of Supervisors wants to see go through the development process that they approve, that at least while we own and maintain the sewer system, that we're complying with our corrective action plan and that we, are there. So that's why we're doing this one earlier. Last year, obviously we got caught with COVID and not knowing that is, and it delayed some things. I don't want to be in that same position if I can help it this year. And that's why we're aggressively going after them early on in the year.
Also jump in with that. I think the estimate right now would be for a fourth quarter closing. If we said October or so with the time frame that Fred gave, that gives us about 90 days or so beyond even I think what we felt was a reasonable time frame to have that work done.
Any other discussion? Monica, is there any public comment?
There's no public comment.
And with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
So 4 in favor
I'm a no.
and 1 opposed. Okay, thank you. Motion carries 4-1. Thank you, Dan. Okay, then we are through the manager's report and on to...
I just want to give you a real quick one more page, just give you a heads up of what's coming down the pike, and then I will be done, and I can leave you guys alone. There are 2 additional projects that are in the 2020 budget, 2021 budget. One is a Silver Lake pump station upgrade, and those pumps are at the end of their mechanical life. We actually have to manually backflush the filters and the pumps, and we've had 3 of the shafts break already this year. This pump station is literally, we have operators out there on emergency calls on a weekly basis, keeping this thing afloat. It is part of our budget. We're obviously trying to, first, but we can't defer this. So this is under design right now, and we'll have a big package ready for your consideration at the April meeting. The other item that's in the budget that we're actively working on is the Buck Creek liner, and that's in our budget. However, I need to televise this line, and I have not been able to identify a portion of this liner, of this interceptor was previously lined. We don't know exactly what sections were lined because they jumped around. So we have to televise it in order to confirm the scope of work on that. And we have not, and it's not on a roadway, it's in an easement. We have not been able to get out there due to the snow to get a television truck down, and the flows are so excessively high due to the wet groundwater that we need to bypass pump it. So we have a contractor lined up that can bypass pump this so that we can televise it, but that's been delayed by the weather. So we will be bringing that in front of the board, hopefully in April, weather permitting. I went from too much snow and cold weather to now, I got to make sure that my trucks can get in there just in the wet, soggy area. But I just wanted to let you know that is coming. Now that completes my report.
No, it doesn't. Dan has a question.
No,
Okay.
Well, it's just talking about 2021 projects. Fred, this might be for you or Kurt, because I'm not sure how they communicate these days with not you guys, the other folks I'm going to ask you about. Have we heard anything from the sometimes elusive MMA in terms of what they have in store for 2021 and what projects we may have to do with them? I know it's never, we've gone through this before. It's always trying to figure out what they have set up and when they're going to hit us with it. So I'm curious if that's come up yet. And if so, what you've heard, and if not, what the plans are for communicating with them to figure that out fairly soon.
I have not heard from them at all.
And respectfully, we have been in the midst over the last couple of months of reconciling even 2018. So, we've not heard anything. Typically, they give us, we don't get stuff as they go. We get stuff as their audit is done, and they provide it to us that we ask for verification for. But I've not heard for anything this year. And just as a reminder to the board, even if they're doing something this year, the practice has been that we wouldn't get that bill until about 18 months from now, as far as our portion of it goes. Yeah, hence the way I prefaced it, Kurt. I hear what I'm just curious if we've done any, what's the word? I'll say proactive communication to see if we can get ahead of that. And then ultimately, what also plays into that is, if we've heard anything about what their updated plans are for the treatment plant. If anything like of that nature has been public of anytime recently.
I haven't heard any.
Because ultimately, no matter what, when the sewer sale goes through, we're still stuck with dealing with MMA in our rate. So I want to see how we manage that. So curious to hear.
And they get to mark it up,
Yeah.
So we haven't had any discussion with MMA at all about capital projects for out years?
We have not had discussions. We've had the public works director that's reached out to them. They tend to not give us advance notice of expenses.
So if the sale were to pass, any bill that they would provide thereafter wouldn't be our responsibility, correct? Or,
I would argue if the service years are for prior to the sale, that it would be our responsibility.
do we have that confirmed in the contract?
I'd have to look at the APA and all the other information to look at that as far as how that will be classified. I don't know that off the top of my head right now. I don't.
I have been, the discussion internally has been, we would have the expectation of that, which is why in the end, as I've said, and we have, if the sale goes through, that there would be ongoing obligations that we would need to keep that sewer fund open to satisfy those debts that we would have.
Yeah, but I guess we would be creating a unique circumstance if that goes through, because there's no incentive for them to want to delay any projects when they could push them forward and know that they would get instant payment without pushback.
I don't know that it would be instant payment. I mean, it would be that's the way it's been for years and years and years, John, where, we get an $800,000 bill from them from projects 2 years prior. It's been in the last 3 years, we've asked for backup to those bills. And as I think as I've reported to the board, we've shed off tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of bills as we have concluded some of those items weren't in fact capital expenses, or they were not able to produce invoices to pay those bills. That's been a series of meetings since I've started here that we've had. So in the end, when the sale goes through, if there was a capital expense after whenever that date would be, let's just say the fourth quarter, that would, at least from my perspective, that would go to Aqua for those bills. If it was something prior to that, at least under the description that I have, that may be our responsibility. But as the solicitor said, that will be something we'd have to look in the asset purchase agreement.
Yeah, I know that they, as part of what they were doing previously, they gave us access to their Dropbox to see, all their invoices and all their activities in the past. So we'd have maybe some sense of what could be coming down the road. It would be a good idea to probably have that down because it's a contingent liability we might face. Now, granted, we don't know the results of the final process here, but that's something we really probably want to know either way. We want to be on track with.
Okay. Well, now I think we're done. And now I think we're moving along to the solicitor's report.
You guys, thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Be well.
Yep, be well.
Okay, for the solicitor's report, first, the executive session started tonight at 6:45. All board members participated in the executive session. And also present was Chief Galuzzi, Mr. Ferguson, and myself. Items related to litigation, real estate, and informational items were discussed at the executive session, which concluded shortly before this meeting started at 7:30. Under my report is just kind of a conceptual proposal. We've had some discussions in the last couple meetings, I think, about amending Section 99-8 of the Code of Ordinances, which relates to responsible contractors, specifically as it relates to the timeframe for public review for what we're trying to describe as recurrent contracts. Unfortunately, for tonight's meeting, I think we have some examples of what might qualify and others, one which may not. So just for illustrative purposes. For example, the Liquid Fuels Road Program would, I think, be considered to be a recurrent program, for example. It's something that occurs every year. Usually some of the same contractors are bidding on the project, so a shorter review period would seem to make sense. As similar to that would be, perhaps similar to that, again, this is just for illustrative purposes, not to make it definitive, would be the pool painting project. One that would not be subject to that provision, I would say, would be the Sandy Run project, which is unique and is not recurrent, hopefully. So anyway, so that's what was kind of the impetus and the desire to look at this. And my suggested, again, just to kind of spitball this, Section 99-8D reads, currently, a procurement contract subject to this chapter shall not be executed until all requirements of this chapter have been fulfilled and until contract and subcontract responsibility certifications and subcontractor lists have been made available for public inspection for at least 21 days. My suggested amendment, again, if I take no pride in authorship, would be to add a subsection 1 under that section. This to state the review period prescribed in this section is reduced to a period of no more than 14 days for public inspection for those contracts that are recurring, i.e. occur on a regular basis, such as annually. Such, quote, recurrent contracts, end quote, include, for reference purposes only, annual street and road resurfacing contracts and municipal pool repainting contracts. So again, this is just something to consider. What I would suggest, and if the board certainly wants to tonight, that they can direct us to advertise something with that language, or if they want to take a little more time to look at that, perhaps have some other ideas. But if they're in favor of moving forward on this, perhaps at the next meeting, we can authorize advertisement on something that is more concrete and the board has had an opportunity to review and digest. So that's what that's all about tonight.
So just 1 second, John. In order to have a discussion, we need to make the motion. And then if we do, in fact, decide we don't want to do anything right now, that motion would be tabled. Go ahead, John.
Table or defer to the next meeting, move to have it defer to the next meeting.
Yeah, if I could make a motion to direct the solicitor to develop revised language related to recurring contracts to allow the time period to be reduced from 21 to 14 days. I don't want to tell you specifically how to draft it. I think you're on the right path. The only suggestion I would make, and again, this is far from motion, but why don't I leave the motion that we
Please. So
draft
there's a motion.
Revised ordinance.
I'll second.
Okay, now that it's on the table, can we talk a little bit about that?
Can I just slow you down for a second?
Sure.
Right. So now we're going to go, because the motion is made by you, John, seconded by Dan, and now we're going to open it up for discussion. Okay, John, go ahead.
So what you'd said previously sounds right on target for me. My only suggestion is you may want to have the definitions of what a recurring contract is separate from the language in there, but that's easy to do. And we're just giving you general direction, I think, on that, and authorizing you to make those, revisions.
Okay.
That's all I have on this. In general, my thought is that those kinds of contracts can be done through an expedited review process. We are dealing with the same vendors. And fortunately, I think on the road budget, we're getting some variation, meaning it's the same vendors, but they're not always winning, which is a good sign that we have competition in that space. So as long as we continue to have that, I'm generally supportive of this.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I get Dave. The concept sounds good. We talked about it last meeting or whatever. A couple times. I think we've talked about this a few times over the last year or so. I guess the one thing I would say is if Andy or Jim or whoever else or Kurt, obviously, if there's any nuances to these recurrent contracts, because they are mostly engineering or procurement type contracts, right? If there's any nuance that they would recommend adding in there about, which if there's a recurrent contract that should be under this, but some recurrent contract that might be an exception to this rule.
And that's why I used that. And I'm happy to do that. I did copy Jim on the email that had this, and I'll certainly be glad to include Andy. I used it for reference purposes because I didn't know if we wanted to enumerate specifically, because then something else might pop up. And we don't have to amend the ordinance every time something changes. But to your point, I think I can get certainly input from Andy, and Jim would be very helpful on something like this. So I'll certainly seek that out and report back to the board and have something for everybody for that purpose.
Dave, I don't know if it needs to be quantified down to the contract, right? Because just as an example, to Dan's point, we're starting to do trails every year. We haven't always done trails. So while some of the contractors might be the same, until we establish that process or know that pattern, it may not be we may deem right now we don't know who any of these guys are.
Right.
And we want to go through, we don't want to deem it recurrent. Is there a way that as part of the process when we bid that, or that when we review that, we could make that determination as we go, and something could, so in other words, if it's done every year, it could qualify as recurrent, like trails, or who knows, we may have other projects that begin to be annual projects, whether it be inlet repairs, or that's not part of the road program, or basin repairs, or things that we end up establishing a pattern and recognizable vendors, but we don't at the start, that we wouldn't extend that courtesy to.
I would suggest we do that. Then we have some kind of clause in there about applicable technical and or engineering review. So you have kind of in addition to the quantitative, you have a qualitative element to it as well. But that makes sense to me. It gives us, again, I think the helpful point here is we want to make sure it's sufficiently definitive so we know what we're talking about, but it's flexible enough that as time goes on, as circumstances may change and contracts may change, and that we're able to do this without having to amend the ordinance every time. I want to, for draftsman purposes, I want to make sure that we're not stuck with something so specific that then, 3 years from now, something else comes up that's we deem it to be recurrent, and then, it's not enumerated specifically, so we have to amend the ordinance. I'm trying to save the township money and hopefully make it workable. But I think all these are good ideas, and I'll try to certainly put something together and get it out to the board, and they get to Andy and Jim and you within a day or two, and then we can all look at it and see how we want to work with it going forward. So happy to do that. Any other input? Certainly welcome.
Monica, is there any public comment?
There's no public comment.
Surprised there's no public comment on this topic.
So as to the motion, do we want to?
Well, right now, Supervisor Lewis his motion is just to direct me to draft language. So
okay,
I can do that. We're not actually authorizing any advertisements. So I think it's just to continue down the path we started. That's the way I understand it. So,
right. So if that's the case, we would simply call the question directing you to draft it.
Yep.
And that's okay.
Yeah. So John, you're in agreement with that's what your motion was? Because I know I got interrupted in the middle of it. So, okay.
No
great.
worries. Yep. That's fine.
Okay. So, hello, Barbara. So with that, I call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Next, zoning hearing board matters. There are 4 before you tonight. I'll try to get through them as quickly as possible in terms of the different ones. First, Matthew T. Scanlon is requesting a variance for the property located at 1230 Silver Stream Drive in Yardley, Lower Makefield, in order to permit the installation of an open rail black aluminum fence in the stormwater easement. This is something that's fairly common, and in Mr. Scanlon's application, he's already affirmatively stated that they will certainly make access for any township departments available, which they would have to do anyway. But it shows a consciousness on his part to allow that. So we'd recommend deferring to the zoning hearing board unless there's some other sentiment by board members tonight. Hearing none. Next, I'm sorry,
Dave.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No.
Suzanne was looking down. I wonder.
Sorry.
Quick, I see. I'm just looking online at the map. There's a basin behind the house, directly behind the house, with a nice little fountain to aerator. I'm assuming that's a township. It's surrounded by homes. I'm just curious if that's a township.
I don't know if it is or if
I
that's
see Andy has something to add.
a HOA dedicated one. Go ahead, Andy.
No, it's actually a pond that is on the neighbor's property. Some of the stormwater does direct over to that pond, but that's a private pond.
Huh. Okay. So who owns who's the easement to?
Well, this is part of the Oakmont development that was done last year, completed last year. So there is a storm sewer on that property that directs runoff to the basin for the Oakmont development. But it directs it, I guess, further south as opposed to due east from the house.
Okay, so the aerial is deceiving. Yeah, well, I guess Court Creek is directly south of directly south of the cul-de-sac, so there's not too many places it could go, I guess. Okay, I just want to make sure I don't always like putting stuff over easements that prevents access. So it's curious.
Understood.
That's it for me. Sorry.
Any further discussion? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Next, item B, William Connell is requesting a variance for the property located at 701 Jade Road, Yardley, PA, in order to permit the installation of an in-ground pool with patio and an equipment pad, which will increase the impervious surface from existing 20.9 to 24%, where 18% is otherwise required. Jade is in the area of Silver Lake. And it's my understanding, at least I don't have any information, if this is any flood zone. This is not unlike numerous other applications that have been made the last several months, especially during the pandemic. So unless there's contrary recommendation, we recommend, or contrary sentiment, we recommend deferral to the zoning hearing board. Hearing none, there are no contrary sentiment. I'll move on to the next one. It's a little bit longer here. Gabriel Deck and Alexandra Kalukovich Deck are requesting a variance for the property located at the intersection of Woodland Drive and West School Lane in order to permit setbacks on resource protected lands to be measured from the lot lines, whereas the setbacks would otherwise be measured from the limit of the resource protected lands, to fill within a floodplain, a 35.2% disturbance within the floodplain area, whereas 100% of the floodplain would otherwise be protected, a 40.8% disturbance of a wetland buffer area, whereas 100% of the wetland buffer area would otherwise be protected. A single-family dwelling unit on a flag lot containing 28,750 square feet, exclusive of the area of the lane or flagpole, whereas 40,000 square feet would otherwise be required. A lot width of 134 feet, whereas 160 feet would otherwise be required. And a lane or flagpole with a width of 18 feet, whereas 25-foot width is otherwise required. Mr. Majewski did weigh in tonight with some observations. It's about 2.5 hours ago. He said, after reviewing the application, the extent of relief can be reduced by a little by moving the house further away from the stream, reconfiguring the house layout. It currently sits at 48 feet from the lot in front. It can be moved forward 5 to 10 feet, which would increase the storm and wetlands buffer to pull more of the house out of the floodplain, and the house would be required to be elevated a minimum of 1.5 feet above the base flood elevation. Our inclination is to recommend participation, especially with Mr. Majewski's input, but I'll defer to the board as to how they want to proceed. And if they want to participate, we would need a vote to authorize our office to participate on behalf of the township.
So,
Are you asking a question, or?
I'm sort of in the middle. I lean more towards opposition based on these numbers, more so than just participating. There's significant impacts to multiple resources. I'm looking at maps with floodplains and mapped wetlands very close by. If this was a land development plan, they'd have a very difficult time with reviews by engineers and let alone the EAC. So I think I would make a motion to oppose based on what we're seeing here.
Okay.
Is there a second? John, was that a second?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
I guess I'll just, if I can. Oh, sorry, Fred, if you want to go. I'm
kind of ambivalent. I would participate, but not oppose if Mr. Majewski feels that there is a way forward for the landowner. But if it's something that's not realistic, I would definitely agree with Dan and oppose this. Oppose the proposal.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, no, I'm waiting for Fred because I understand where he's coming from because this is a nuance here. It's just the level of impact, 35% in the floodplain alone when we have all of our floodplain issues, and then 40% of a wetlands buffer. That's 40. That's a big number. You're essentially negating that buffer at that point, and having some very big impacts on the floodplain. When you do that, you're not only impacting your property. The issue with floodplains, when you fill in the floodplain, is that you're taking away floodplain storage. That water has to go somewhere, so that affects their neighbor, right? That 35% volume, whatever that volume ends up being, that has to go somewhere eventually. So if you're filling up your tub and you get in it, you know what I mean? You get all that displacement that goes and affects your neighbor, and that's, it's causing an issue potentially causing a major issue for someone else by allowing this type of thing. So that's where my concerns come from.
Yeah, so Dan, I think that's a good point. And I know that Dave had said that he heard from Jim earlier tonight, and we discussed that. Jim believes that by shifting the house, I think that those numbers would be cut basically in half. Does that give you any more comfort or not really? So like if the 40.8% went down to, let's say, 23%, just in case it's not really 50%. Does that help or not really?
Not really for me personally. It's just, those are big numbers. And it's just, when you get to numbers that big, it's tough to, even when you cut them in half, they're still bigger numbers than what you would typically want to approve. When you're giving someone some flexibility, those are, even cutting them in half, they're still rather large. So that's, if it was down to like let's say 5%, yeah, maybe we could do something. They do something interesting, they do some interesting mitigation to address that, right? That's something I could get on board with, but the numbers are still pretty big in my opinion.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
If I could, by announcing our opposition, perhaps could cause the applicant to, amend their current proposal and come back with something that might be closer, and let the zoning hearing board, if they come back amended, we can review it. But if the zoning hearing board then could continue its work, but to resolve much more minor issues and not have to go up against such a major significant issue. So this could be a way for us to say, hey, listen, as a suggestion, as it's currently drafted, the application we would oppose.
Jim, I see that you have appeared. Is there something you wanted to add to the conversation?
I hear what everyone's saying, and this is one of those applications that you can go either way. Basically, they do have room to reduce their disturbance in the floodplain and to the wetlands buffer by shifting the house around, and whether the board gives that input to the applicant through participation or through opposition to the application, I think is sort of a flip a coin type of situation.
Okay. Yes, Dan.
Yeah, to that point, listening to Supervisor Lewis, I think it sends a stronger message if we oppose based on the current design, and then that may hopefully have them work with, I don't know if they're working with an architect or what, but have them take a closer look at the lay of the land there and see where they can make improvements. And rather than having the zoning hearing board have to make a decision almost on the spot with respect to that, they can actually, if we oppose, that may encourage them to go back to their architect or whoever's laying out the house, rethink it take more time to rethink it versus having the discussion with the zoning hearing board up front about tweaks and whatnot, and then they can come back with a better plan that's better thought out, that hopefully has reduced these impacts a great deal.
Yes, John.
Along those lines, and one of the things, I'm not the liaison this year, but it would save the zoning hearing board probably hours of testimony and back and forth if the applicant came back and revised. Because in many cases, the zoning hearing board is going to work through and try and find accommodations that meet the need of the property owners and the neighboring community. And they end up doing, recommendations and engineering on the spot. Whereas if we can do this now, perhaps we can save them some of the work that eventually would, to get them to closer. And I think what we're saying here is maybe we're pushing back to say, hey, come back with a new application. You'll get, we won't oppose.
Any further discussion? Any public comment, Monica?
There is no public comment.
Then all those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand and saying aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. The last item under this agenda item is Sunil Dar is requesting a variance for the property located at 1201 Silver Stream Drive in order to permit the installation of an in-ground pool with decking, which would increase the impervious surface from the existing 18.6% to 22.3%, or 19% is otherwise required. Again, a common application we've been seeing, especially the last year or so. So unless there's a contrary determination, we recommend deferral. And hearing no contrary, I'm sorry.
Yes, I agree with deferral.
In that case, then my work for that particular agenda item is done. Thank you.
Dan, go back on mute. No comment?
No, I'm looking at at FEMA, and Jim can probably confirm, but this is a relatively new neighborhood. And this is the second house on Silver Stream that we've looked at in this little set. The one house backed up to that private pond, and this one, it looks like it's the last house on the cul-de-sac before you get to the woods, and I think that's Buck Creek. I might be wrong. So I just wanted to confirm with Jim and/or Andy that this one isn't. There is a flood zone associated with Buck Creek, but I think they're just out of it. Is that right, Jim? Am I reading the map right?
So this is a property that is immediately adjacent to the stormwater management system that was installed for the Oakmont development. So in between the stream and the house is the basement.
Oh, I see. Okay, I see it now. Gonna zoom in.
So it is outside of the floodplain.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, then we are done and moving on to agenda item number 12, zoning inspections and planning.
Jim, are you there?
I was going to say, it might actually be you again.
I can tell you all about this one if you want, because it came in front of Harb if Jim can't sign in.
I think this is a round 2. I think we
It is.
once
It is.
we're back again. So
And I think I lost track of where I was here. So hold on a second.
So I just wanted to let you know the applicant is on the line. I don't know if you want him in for this section or would he come in during the comment section?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, he should be in.
Okay.
We'll bring him in now.
Jerry, you can hit *6 to unmute.
Jerry, are you unmuted? Nope. Jerry, can you hit *6 to unmute yourself?
How about now?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Can you give us your full name, Jerry?
I was in town. Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Can you give us your full name, Jerry?
Yeah, Jerry Canavan, C-A-N-A-Z, as in Victor, A-N.
Okay. So Jim, you want to take us through this?
Yes, you may recall the applicant was in front of the Board of Supervisors about 2 months ago for a change to the sign to the Rite Aid Pharmacy. Actually, both of them that are in the Lower Makefield Shopping Center and the Edgewood Village Shopping Center. For the one in the Edgewood Village Shopping Center, which is where McCaffrey's is in Villa Rosa, they had proposed changing the siding color to the new Rite Aid standard, sort of a grayish color, I guess it is, and also changing the sign. The Board of Supervisors approved that. However, then they decided they wanted to keep the siding color red and just change the sign from the existing one that you just saw previously a minute ago to their new branded logo with the mortar and pestle and the new lettering with the red siding. The Historical Architectural Review Board reviewed the application, the revised application, and unanimously recommended approval of the sign as submitted.
Do we need a motion?
Just a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness, sorry, for 657 Heacock Road.
James beat you to it. James is a motion maker. Dan is a second. Is there any discussion? Go ahead, Dan.
Real quick, yeah, this came in front of Harb a couple times now. I think Jim, I think you and I probably both made the sidebar comment that, hey, I kind of, when they changed it from the red to the grayish off-white color, that, hey, I kind of like the red. That's too bad. So I'm pleased. That was no official comment, but I'm pleased that it went back to the red. I think it looks better. So that's good. So Harb had no issues with this as the liaison. I guess I'll pass that along. But I personally like the red better than that other color they had, or the maroon versus that other color they had.
Any other supervisors? Mr. Caravan, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No. Unless any questions.
Is there any public comment, Monica?
There's no public comment.
Okay, then with that, we'll call the question. All those in favor of the return to red motion, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you very much, everyone.
Have a good night.
You too.
Okay. So now on to agenda item number 13. Monica, is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay. Then moving on to agenda item number 14, discussion items. We have 2 matters up for discussion tonight, and I see that Solicitor Kirk has joined us for what I think is the first item, short-term lodging ordinance update discussion. So, Kurt, did you want to start?
Sure. So we talked a bit last year about some experiences that we've had. We passed our short-term lodging ordinance, that we wanted to get staff's input regarding how we could sharpen that, recommendations that those overseeing it would have as far as making this have the oversight that we think is necessary and changes to be able to do that. Staff started putting together a draft of those comments that we have worked with Barbara on. We looked at some comparable ordinances as well to see what was happening elsewhere. And so what you have before you that was in the packet was the original version of the ordinance along with the red line version of where there's some changes. I will tell you, obviously the board is going to want to add whatever it wants. The questions as a staff that came up that I think that we're going to be a board discussion are going to be on those items of parking. Both, there's legal, there are legal controls as far as how big we can be, but there's also the ability that we understand the implications of, for example, a large house being converted to to have rooms available. So I think when we get that, you're going to see from us that, you're going to hear varying points that the board can sit and contemplate on. But I will turn it over to Barbara to go over the draft that we have, to go through those items and to take questions. And Jim is here as well to participate in that.
Thank you, Kurt. So what I did is I actually took the ordinance that this board previously approved and did redline versions to make it easier for you to see the comparison. So the first couple of pages are the actual preambles and formal ordinance that would be signed. And I just simply, rather than try to piecemeal and say, delete this, delete that, add this, I generally just included an overall provision that basically says the ordinance that was previously approved is repealed in its entirety, and it's going to be replaced with a new ordinance, which is attached as Exhibit A. I don't know if you want me to go through this step by step, Madam Chair, or do you want me to just point out highlights or take questions? Because I don't want to overburden everybody. I'm sure you've all looked at it already.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, like, we have this on as a discussion item for exactly that, right? We're not publishing anything tonight. We're not, moving forward per se, but to try to, when we passed this, I think in 2018, we were, I'm going to say, one of the first townships, certainly locally, to try to address this emerging issue. And I think that effort that was spearheaded by John really, has served us well. But we've also learned that there's areas for improvement. And so that's why I wanted to bring this forward tonight, to start to get your input as to how we could make some changes. Barbara's done a great job in comparing what's developed since then and seeing what other townships who have had more experience, how they have amended their ordinances or rules. So with that, I'm happy to start the discussion how anybody would like to proceed. Do you want to hit the highlights? Do you want to just go ask questions? I'm a big fan of the red line, Barbara. Thank you.
You're welcome. I just thought it would be easier so you could see the differences instead of trying to go back and forth to compare. The only problem with the red line is they do it in such small font, and there's no way to make it larger.
The curse of the trade.
I will tell, I would like to tell the board, though, that what I did do is, before I started doing these revisions, is I had an opportunity to be provided a copy of a similar ordinance issued by Palmyra Township in Pike County, which is in the Pocono Mountain region. I did attempt to reach their solicitor just to see if there were any claims filed or opposition to the proposed ordinance. I couldn't find anything of record doing a diligent search. Unfortunately, their solicitor has taken ill, and I wasn't able to speak with him, but I could not find anything of public record to indicate there were any challenges to that ordinance. I also did an updated review on some of the cases dealing with Airbnbs, most of which involved the various municipalities trying to pigeonhole this type of facility under zoning regulations. I think it's wise for this board to continue to have a short-term lodging facility ordinance as a standalone ordinance and not under the zoning regulations, because some of the applicable law is different when it's involving zoning versus a standalone ordinance relative to public health, welfare, and safety. And what we try to do is just basically tighten some of the definitions, added a few definitions, clarified that if there is a residential home being offered for short-term lodging, regardless of who is doing the offering, the owner of the property is going to be the ultimate person responsible, whether they have an agent offering it, an agency or something. The owner, This way, nobody can try to wiggle out saying, well, I didn't know what my contractor was doing or what the real estate agent was doing. We also try to update what license requirements would be required so that there is a clear understanding and an acknowledgement by the person seeking the license that they can have less than 70 square feet for the bedroom to be used, that they've read all of the regulations, that they provide a telephone number of who to contact regarding the short-term lodging facility, that they confirm there's a clear posting of like the emergency numbers and the addresses, and further that they provide the township with the information relative to who is going to be doing the marketing or advertising, so that there's a mechanism for the township to double check to make sure it's not being advertised falsely as opposed to what the ordinance otherwise requires. They also asked, the staff asked that instead of just doing one annual inspection, that they schedule 2 annual inspections to make sure that everything is being met under the terms of the ordinance, as well as property maintenance. Any type of change to the proposed short-term lodging intended would require a renewal or a changed license to be issued by the township. So if somebody comes in and says they're only offering 2 of the bedrooms for short-term lodging, they can't all of a sudden decide they're going to offer 4 bedrooms without it being approved by the township under the license. I tried to address issues that came up in the past with respect to lighting, exterior lighting, noise being generated by whoever's occupying the facility, things of that nature.
Barbara, may I add as well, the one provision we added, and you probably know the number better than I, would be whatever by the ordinance you're allowed to rent must be the way that you market it then. So you cannot have a license that allows you to rent 2 rooms and you're advertising 3.
Yes.
That in and of itself would be a violation of the ordinance. We wouldn't have to physically inspect and see you with 3 renters at once, just that you're advertising it would be a violation.
Correct. And that is a whole separate section that was added to this ordinance. Other than that, again, I think those were the highlights of this, those revisions.
Yes, Dan.
Barbara, I'm all the way at the bottom, section 130-10, enforcement and penalties.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about these ordinances sometimes is that we put a lot of effort into writing a good ordinance, and they're difficult to enforce sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. So I'm looking at this section. Primarily, first violation is $1,000 fine.
Mm-hmm.
There's second violation is $1,000 fine and not more than 90 days imprisonment.
Yes.
I'm noticing a red line there with the number 2. And then there's a deleted, just a pound sign or number sign or hashtag for the youngins.
I think it was just formatting.
Just the format. Okay. I just want to make sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I guess we have the enforcement equity, and then the new one that we added here. If the owner commits the same or similar violation within 1 year of receiving a notice of violation as set forth in the ordinance, no additional notice shall be required to be served on that owner prior to the township initiating enforcement action. Can you explain that one a bit?
Sure. So again, there is a distinction as to whether an ordinance is being enforced under zoning regulations or property maintenance. This would be enforced under property maintenance. Under the law, that allows the township it requires the township to issue a notice of violation when a complaint is lodged and give the property owner so much time to correct it. If that is not corrected within the time frame given by the township then can file a non-traffic summary offense citation in the local magisterial court. That is the triggering mechanism where a hearing will then be held in front of the judge and a fine could be imposed. What that additional provision is saying is if the township has gone through the steps of notifying a property owner of a violation and less than a year has passed and another violation occurs, the township can skip the part about giving written notice to correct and just file immediately in the district court.
Thank you. And then not being a lawyer, can you also the existing condition there, enforcement inequity? Can you explain enforcement inequity too, please?
Because with summary offenses, when they relate to issues dealing with public health, safety, welfare, and things of that nature, there's a separate section in the statute that outlines all of them. And if you want them, I can give them to you because I happen to do that right here in front of me. Rather than go through the issue, the whole purpose of trying to just get fines, because that's all a magisterial district judge can do is issue fines. The township has reserved the right that they can file an action up in Doylestown and ask for a specific performance or a specific injunction to prevent somebody from using the property as a short-term lodging facility. And that's separate. That's a separate mechanism that's available to the township under this ordinance.
Okay.
And that would be a more immediate relief, and would also, if the person would not then comply with whatever order the judge might issue, they could be held in contempt. So there's a more immediate enforcement ability with that, as opposed to some people don't mind paying fines. They don't pay fines, and all they have is a lien on their property. Whereas opposed to this, actually will have more oversight over the person themselves. So
and this isn't a on their third strike. You go to this. This looks like if it's bad enough, we can use. That's an option out of the gate, right?
Yes. So if it's say it's somebody who, without naming any individuals, who has continued to use the property for short-term and more lodging without getting the appropriate licensing or not having the appropriate marketing provided to the township or anything of that nature, and the township has verbally said to them numerous times, you got to do this, and they're not, and they're still using the property, this allows us to go right to Doylestown to stop it.
Okay. Yeah. And anything particularly egregious that we find that's, I get. And then in terms of practical application, do we have any numbers? And Kurt, this might actually be for you in terms of number of enforcement actions and fines that have been issued based off of the ordinance to date. I'm just curious as to.
Can I start with the first part of this, just so everyone's aware? Barbara, you interrupt me and correct me if I'm wrong. The provision for fines in this ordinance is not the township going out to fine. It's when we would go before a judge, this gives that judge or magistrate, the capability of looking at the ordinance. So if he or she chooses to impose one, this sets the parameters for what that could be. We would be going out and handing them $1,000 fine. So
fines could not happen unless there's a judge that issues it.
So in the end, I think the total judgment we've received, and Jim is sitting here with, I think his camera's off. I believe so far has been $5,000
in total of all them. Yeah.
Of all the various. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And
that's just helpful to understand what the level of the. This is something we're all concerned about. It helps to understand what the level of the issue is, right? How common it is.
Yeah.
And the last thing for me, just what section? Sorry, I'm trying to give you a section number. I guess in the first section, 130-1 for B5, the new language, the bottom of page 4.
Yes.
I guess I get the language, but on some level I'm uncomfortable with that particular language. In some instances where I've seen language similar to this, it's used as in a way I wouldn't be comfortable using it. I'm not sure how else to say that, but I get what we're trying to do, but I just that particular language, I'm just uncomfortable with it. I'm not sure entirely why, but it just.
Just so you know, it was something that was included in one of the ordinances I looked at.
Yeah, and understood.
Yeah. It was in response to the Supreme Court decision in Schenck on the Airbnb, where the Supreme Court actually overturned a decision in the Commonwealth Court on the basis that the location, the locale of where the Airbnb was being operated disturbed the residential nature of the area. And again, I just added it. I mean, I thought it's a lot easier to add something to bring it to your attention to discuss. And if you didn't like it, we just take it out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's one of those things that I get why it's there, but at the same time, it leaves me with an uncomfortable feeling. And it's just there. That's all. And then I think the rest of the nuts and bolts of it seem pretty straightforward. I was just curious about, some of the upfront definition versus the enforcement is always what's interesting to me in these types of ordinances. But that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I as the person who took some of the slings and arrows on this one in 2018, I believe I was compared to the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un for my advocacy of this policy. So I am pleased to see that what was once considered vastly not popular is now considered mainstream. In general, I'm very comfortable with many of the edits, but I do share Supervisor Grenier's concern specifically around that particular language. If terms around non-conforming use or inappropriate use, the language that he spoke of in section 131B5, it's just the structure of that one, that intent language, again, it's not policy functional, but it's the kind of thing that could cause concern and be perceived of as exclusionary in general, as opposed to, how you meant or how the drafter intended it. That's all.
But understand, this is not an exclusion under a zoning ordinance. This is a property maintenance style ordinance.
Right. No, I understand that, but there's words there that are. I know that.
Well, I just want to read it out loud, John, so that
sure.
To preserve the traditional character of residential neighborhoods that can be negatively impacted by this type of use, referring to I'll just say Airbnb, and to help preserve the quantity and quality of residential housing for year-round residential use. So I think I hear what you're both saying. I guess maybe the reason why I don't see it the way you see it is because I understand the case that Barbara is trying to address and why the courts would want to see some of that language in there, but there's probably some way that we can work on it so that it meets both needs.
Yeah, and my intent here, my concern is driven. There's value in offering all different types of housing and all different types of rental circumstances. The challenge here is sometimes short-term rentals have profound negative consequences in certain neighborhoods based on the type of rental that it's used for. And that's where I think the driver is for a lot of this. And I don't want anything to be perceived that the intent of the ordinance is to be exclusionary in any way. Lower Makefield welcomes, everyone who's law-abiding to the community to live here. We want to make sure that we have, fair and equitable treatment for folks. But it's only 2 words. It's not the end of the world, but that's one I just wouldn't want to see perceived otherwise. A couple things. We've not lost any cases under our existing ordinance, meaning we have not lost any of the ones that we've dealt with previously, correct, Township Manager Furger? Which is excellent. By the way, a number of people thought that the town would be sued and would have to go to the court, and that this was well drafted in the beginning. So these are good enhancements off of what was well drafted in the beginning. We face no court challenges with this ordinance under its structure either, correct?
None that I'm aware of.
Right. So from those perspective, I think we've taken something that's been very good, and many of these things are a great, excellent enhancement. So I don't have any issues with most of what's in here.
Yes, Kurt. Sorry, James.
Let James go.
I just had a question, Barbara, specific to that verbiage. An example of something like that, would maybe that help clarify what the advantage of having that written in there? Because I'm trying to figure out where Dan and John are as far as that not being comfortable. What would be an example of that? I mean, in my mind, an example of that would be a residential neighborhood that happens to border a college, say, Ewing Township, and a fraternity decides to rent one of the houses within the residential section. That to me would be considered, well, depending on the fraternity, I should clarify, that could potentially be something that's not traditional to use to residential housing within a particular neighborhood. So do you think that that's maybe where that specific verbiage comes from?
I think it was just in general. What comes to mind is if you have a fairly dense residential neighborhood consisting of single families living in there, and then you have one of the units that is being leased or used frequently for short-term lodging, like an Airbnb type of thing, it could have an impact due to the quality of the neighborhood because of the density. Or again, the only one that I can think of is the one that we've all been dealing with in the past that has a residence that actually borders another municipality. And because of the way it's been used, it's not only impacted our township, but it's impacted the residents of the other municipality who happen to be just there, right there too. So, I mean, other than that, I can't think of anything immediately off the top of my head.
And again, what is our market for this? What type of draw is Lower Makefield for short-term, Airbnb rentals? I know that there's maybe some, soccer tournaments or maybe some sporting events. I'm not really sure. Is there a huge market for people renting short-term in Lower Makefield?
I would suspect, in light of the pandemic and people not willing to want to go to a public facility as great as like a hotel type of thing, there may be a greater demand to be able to use a short-term rental if there's family trying to visit somebody in the neighborhood, or coming from another, upper New York down to visit relatives, in lieu of staying in a large public type of hotel type of thing. We might actually see an increase. I mean, that's yet to be determined.
One example.
I would actually point out as well that our golf course is a draw for people that would come to town, let's say visiting relatives to golf. I have friends of mine that pick out courses and high quality courses and stay in Airbnbs all over the place to spend the weekend golfing. That I think we've seen that as well, James, that are one of our own assets that we have is a draw for that.
James, we had a house rented out to campers who were going to a dance school in Princeton for a week or two, and they were being shuttled up to the camp. So we had, I think a family came from England so they could experience a traditional Halloween. Mm-hmm. So we've run quite the gambit.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, is this 1 off, 2 off, 3 off, and what the percentage is, and yeah, John.
Yeah, I was going to say, to the extent it varies. That I've seen times where there are more frequent rental opportunities, and it's not just Airbnb. That's one company, highly respected. They've made significant changes in their regulatory compliance over the last year, specifically since they've gone public. So I don't want this to be perceived as anti-Airbnb or VRBO, who have made significant strides. It brings up what your previous point was, which was the fraternity house concept. And that's kind of the situation where we have a use that's not in character or something that we would expect in a residential community. In the past, municipalities dealt with this a lot of different ways. They created ordinances that said that no more than two unrelated people can live together. Well, that actually was exclusionary for many folks and led to a Supreme Court case. It was Moore versus East Cleveland, which struck that one down. But that's why these ordinances are so difficult to write and so difficult to want to get right, because you want to get at the party house, the activity that's causing the bad experience for people. So we have had people, like I said, bachelor party, that sort of stuff, the rent a house out, or a situation where people are renting to far more than the house could occupy. And that's a significant public health issue. There is a case that you may be aware of that involves that. Was before the zoning hearing, but I don't want to take Fred's thunder. He'll certainly talk in detail about that. That's why this is such a difficult thing to want to draft correctly on that. But yeah, we want to get at we want to allow people the flexibility to do short-term rentals responsibly here.
Well, I don't think leaving that verbiage in then damages or hurts our case then, right?
I don't think it makes that huge of a difference one way or the other. It is not the substance of the ordinance. It is more of a preamble type to explain what part of the intent was to draft the ordinance. Again, I added it. It's easier to have something added and then you decide you don't want it and remove it than the other way around. It was just another little thing that I found that I thought might help. But if you don't like it, that's fine. Take it out. I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference.
Fred, let's let Fred go first, Dan, and then.
Well, I kind of like this verbiage. I mean, it can be modified slightly because from recent history, especially from the zoning hearing board, as John alluded to, having something like this in the ordinance kind of gives direction for future boards, for the residents in the neighborhood and for the zoning hearing board, if necessary, to stop practices that would be in detriment to the community. So something like this, even as a preamble or as just a further descriptor of what is necessary, I think is appropriate.
So Dan, I know you had something else that you wanted to say, and obviously you will have that opportunity. But if it's more around this, can we allow Barbara to go back and try to tweak it? And then either, we'll take additional comments, or if we should choose to go forward with the publication, we could debate it then. But with that.
And it's not really a debate question by any means. It's more, and I think, Barbara, you started to say this if you didn't already say it, but it's not language. And if I'm putting words in your mouth, I apologize, but it sounds to me like it's not language that we need specifically to enforce the ordinance. The ordinance without that, with or without that language, is still enforceable and is something that we can move forward with. Is that a fair statement?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. That's all I wanted to make sure I was being clear. That's it.
So do we, Jim, did your box light up? Nope. Yep. Nope. Okay. Do we take public comment at this time? If there's any, Kurt, Dave, I guess I should ask, or since we're just discussing, do we just move along to other?
I mean, I think you can take public comment as long as it's confined to the fact that everybody understands it, as you stated at the outset, that this is not going to be published. There's nothing going out tonight. It's just a matter of kind of brainstorming, frankly, publicly, which is good. So and if people have comments about that, there's nothing wrong with taking them now.
Okay. Monica, is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
Mm-hmm. Great. Then moving along to our second item. Yes, Kurt.
You want me to start that since, okay, I'll set that up. So this item was added to the agenda on Monday per my request to the chair of the lease is expiring. We have 175 acres in Patterson Farm that we put out for bid. It's in the 5 years ago. The lease expires at the end of April. So the discussion that I'd like to have is first hope that we would advertise this at our meeting on the 17th. It would be a tight time frame. We would advertise for 30 days. The second April meeting is April 20th, so we have enough time to do all of that. But it is, previously we put this out for bid. We did receive 2 bids 5 years ago for that, and we're in that process now. So as far as initiating that discussion, any changes we want to make, you do have a copy of the previous lease, restrictions, requirements, what have you. We'd be prepared to make any modifications or changes the board thinks are appropriate, with the hope of bringing this back to you all for a formal motion to advertise at the March 17th meeting.
Is there any discussion about this matter? You're on mute, Dan, but you're signaling you have a thought, but.
I get steam coming out. I just don't have any words coming out. I'm thinking.
Okay.
It's a scary thing. No, really, it's just, I know we have to move on this quickly, and it's important that we do. My thoughts on this are a couple things. One, see if we can't get some alignment with some of the farmland preservation leases that are already out there. Looking at issues related to resource buffers. And by resource buffers, I mean wetlands and stream buffers, to make sure we don't impact those. And then just taking a look at different farming practices from an environmental perspective to avoid, and anything we put on the ground ends up in the water. Everything ends up downstream in the watershed. So we want to look to protect those resources. And then finally, really interested in not dictating what's grown, obviously, but having folks come up with some interesting ideas for different crops or uses in terms of where we may have food insecurity issues to promote some of those issues, or more locally grown, even if it's not going to a supermarket, farmers market connections, just to make sure that if we can get them who are willing to farm the land to integrate into the community more than just say like feed corn or something like that, to not mandate that, but provide those as options that we might want to focus on a little bit more. That's all.
And for myself, I feel like I'm always bringing up the sad subject, right? I talk about the declining volunteer fire force, and now I'm going to talk about the declining farmers, right? So, we only need one person who wants to farm it, and it's great that we got 2 last year, but I would love it if, we were able to even see if there was more interest, if we could help be a part of what helps keep farming a vibrant, or at least maybe not vibrant, but, that we help encourage it as much as possible. So if we can look to, I don't know if there's a farmer's almanac that we advertise this kind of stuff in, but to make sure that we get as much interest in this as possible.
Farmer's Almanac is published in my hometown. One of the few things we're known for.
And I didn't even know. I feel bad.
There you go.
2 weeks of summer, I think your hometown's known for too, Dan. So
we don't like to talk about that.
All right. Anybody else? Yes, John.
So we're giving general guidance about the kinds of things that we would have as bid alternates then. The other one I've been thinking about and mulling over in the last hour is offering a 5 and a 10-year lease option. The farmland preservation leases are 10 years. Reason why the board previously extended the lease, it used to be like a 1 year with auto renewal, to the 5 year was there were certain farming benefits for having extended leases. When we talked to farmers last time, there was most of the benefit was at 5, but if there's somebody who wants to go for 10, that's something that we should possibly consider as well. And again, I echo everyone else's comments, and we want to find as many possible farmers out there. It's definitely changed the industry in terms of the number of people needed to be employed in farming. We also lost in New Jersey a very important area to have grain milled, and so now people have to drive further distances. So that's a big issue for farmers in the area. That consolidation in general is a problem. So yeah, we need to find some farmers.
Okay, well, thank you all. So then let's move along to, I'm sorry, was there any public comment on that? I should have asked.
Yeah, we have Donna on the line.
Thank you. Donna, if you can hear me, can you state your full name and address for the record? Donna, can you unmute yourself, please?
Donna, please press *6 to unmute.
Donna, can you please press *6 to unmute yourself?
Okay, very good. Can you hear me now?
Yep, full name and address.
Okay. Donna Doan, 2814 Langhorne Yardley Road, Langhorne. Just wanted to make the suggestion that the township goes with what the Farmland Preservation Corporation did in moving to a 10-year lease. That would allow the farmer to make some financial decisions that have to be made. And we have Bright Farms on a 10-year lease, AOI on a 10-year. Stiers just went with a 20-year lease, actually, from Middletown Township. So this would allow the farmer some decisions and plan financially and would be helpful in maintaining agriculture in our community. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Have a good night.
So.
There's no further public comment.
Okay. Well, then, thank you. Now we will move along to the next agenda item, number 15, Supervisors Report. I have none. So, James, if you have any.
I have none at this time.
Thank you. Fred?
I'm good.
Thank you. John?
Yes, the Trenton Mercer Airport Review Panel will be meeting tomorrow. In the interim, the committee has been working on draft letters to the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, the current acting commissioner, and the FAA. These are designed for elected officials to reach out to the New Jersey Department DEP and to the FAA. Specifically, they're around the structuring of how Mercer County is structuring basically a large project into segments to make it harder to collectively do an environmental assessment and analyze the increased air traffic capacity of the airport. Also, it's designed to limit noise review, air pollution, and potentially water pollution reviews. And so the committee is reviewing those letters tomorrow. The meeting, again, is open to the public. Everybody can, of course, join on Zoom. If they have questions, those will be discussed. But that's the only committee that has had significant business during the period.
Thank you. Dan?
Sure. Let's see. We already discussed the HARB review with Rite Aid, so that's good. The Electric Reliability Committee, they had one sort of request and then one question. The request, in their efforts to gather, let's say, reliability-related data, they were wondering if the township, I would probably say Mr. Majewski, had any data surrounding installation of generators, gas generators, I know a lot of people have portable generators that we may use in case of emergency, but also, as we all know, lots of people have installed whole house generators, like commonly known, Generac is one common brand. Obviously there are others, but was wondering if we might have some information surrounding how many of those whole house generator, what I would call whole house generators anyway, have been installed, as they may require various building permits to install those, just as a way to inform, I guess, the committee in terms of what the potential lack of reliability in some instances has had relative to an economic impact on residents. That's a request that they've made. And that, I don't know if that's easy data or not to acquire, but I did think it was interesting, just as a data point to see what that means, what it's meant to our township. And then really the other question really was just to follow up to see if we've gotten any response from PICO on coming to see them and or the board, based on what we talked about, I think at the end of last year or first thing this year. I forget which meeting we talked about that at. But if Kurt, if you or anyone else has had any feedback from PICO as of yet.
I believe it was their intent to attempt to come before the reliability committee either, now I will say this month, either in March or April. So my original thought was that they would be ready in March. I haven't spoken to them in the last 2 weeks. I know that they were working on answering the questions that the reliability committee had put forth in a letter that came to the board, I believe, and that was in November, I believe. So they have that letter. They're working on. They told me they were working on a presentation to address those points, but I will follow up with them to nail down a specific date.
Appreciate it. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 16, other business. Item 17, are there any appointments to the boards or commissions? Well, then my agenda item number 18, there being no further business before the board, meeting is adjourned. Have a good night, everybody, and stay well.
Good night, y'all.